I am going to talk about angles and axis lines for the upcoming two projects. You guys have just finished doing a couple exercises on the site measuring. And so when it comes to this process of drawing, um, these are necessary because from what I noticed in the past, a lot of students, they want to start making really cool, really nice drawings right away. But really, it's it's good to go through these techniques that's going to help you in the long run. So um, if anything, I would like you guys to get all of these down and try them out for the first 2 or 3 weeks and then start doing projects. So um, let's see what we have here. So we're going to talk about angles and axis lines. So here is an example of the angles and the lines being used here, the axis lines. So whenever it comes to the axis lines, think of a line that is somewhat the center of a particular object or shape. And that this example here has a few still life objects. I don't expect you guys to do that yet. In terms of the way the original artist rendered this one, a lot of us are itching to do some blending, but you guys will totally be able to do that. I feel by next week. But for this week, I've tried to focus on things like scale and proportion because these are really, again, the roots of learning how to get better at drawing from observation. When it comes to drawing from a photograph, I feel like that's really easy, to be honest. You can draw anything, but when it comes to drawing straight from just looking, which is the classic way, that's when you start feeling like you can draw. Like you don't need any tools. You just want to, like get your pencil, get your charcoal on your paper, and just start making beautiful marks right away without having to use any tools. So yeah, but it's funny that I say that because you guys are probably using your your tablets and all your devices to watch this. Um, but what can we do? So anyhow, we are looking at some examples of axis and angles being drawn out here. And something about the original artist, you can see that the artist actually used a grid. And I'm noticing from my intermediate students that there's a couple of them that like to use the grid, and that's actually a very smart way to go about um, planning your overall composition, trying to map things out on paper. But again, this is something that I'm gonna work my way into. Okay, so this is an example of what the angles and axis lines look like. So let me describe them a little bit. Let me get into the reasons why we use them, or the reasons how we could use them. And here is a chart of a clock. So whenever it comes to these lines, some artists, they like to define it by a particular value. So 1 o'clock versus 12 o'clock versus 11 o'clock, that they are making these diagonals. So 12 o'clock would be straight vertical line up and down. And what's cool about seeing objects that you are expecting to be straight up and down, you know right away that that's going to be a straight up and down line. You don't have to really guess if it's leaning towards a particular side. And so say that the line is not straight up and down, that the line that's being created is at a slight angle. So how do we remember that? One way is to, again, use a number. It's not at 12 o'clock, slightly leaning towards the right, suddenly it's 1 o'clock. And so if it's the angle is a little bit wider, then it's leaning towards 2 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock being 90 degrees, or basically a horizontal line. So you can try to look at it this way. Me, I don't actually use this number system. For me, I'm more about vertical lines, horizontal lines, and then just the diagonals that are in between. I feel like if I add numbers to it, I'm just gonna make it more complicated. But this is the preferred method. I believe the artist of our textbook, she probably uses this method. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on here, right? It wouldn't be in the text. And so anyhow, 9 to 3 o'clock is a horizontal line. 12 to 6 is a vertical line. And then we have all of the remaining angles that you can imagine, okay? And so for the assignment, what I'm going to end up expecting from you is this, an image that would look similar to this. So this is actually part 1. You're going to get a few objects again, several objects. I believe did I say 7 on my assignment? I believe I said 7. And so if you can see the example, the artist is actually putting some major axis lines on the objects here. And so if you're looking at, for me, the focal point feels like glasses because it's related to someone's face, and right away I want to look at that. So the brim of the glasses is making this line that is not exactly horizontal. It's not straight 9 to 3 o'clock. Instead, it is slightly leaning towards the 4 o'clock. And so that we can identify that angle as that 4 o'clock. And so the artist drew a circle and then drew that line to make it very, very visible. And that's what I want you to end up doing with your drawings. I want to see these dials in the diagonal that you can identify it with. You don't have to write the numbers like 12, 3, 6, or 9. I think that if it helps you and that you put a number value to it, it makes it a little bit easier. But as long as there's the circle and then diagonal, then you're going to start being able to recognize these things right away, okay? Because if you think about angles and such, if you think about them in general, we can feel what the diagonal is, but if we can identify it, if we can link it to something, if we can put a value to it, then we are starting to, the way I describe it is we start to own it. We start to realize, oh yeah, that is making this diagonal here. And that when I see these diagonals, when I see these lines, then I can be a little bit more precise when it comes to drawing from observation. And in the end of this week's assignment, you're not going to end up with these beautiful drawings. Instead, there are going to be these guides that are going to help you when it comes to your future projects, that you're going to learn how to make them a little bit more proportionate. You're going to learn how to get these angles down. And so, site measuring and then using these axis lines, these are all they're all tools, but they're so useful. Okay, so the glasses has that 4 o'clock diagonal. I can totally feel that line. And so if you're using a pencil and you want to feel that line, you want to say, yeah, that's that feels like that angle there. And if I look at the handle of the saw, the hand saw, and so that looks like a 7 o'clock. So I'm going to use my pencil here. So it's not straight up and down. Instead, it's at a slight diagonal. 7 o'clock. So yeah, it's about that. It feels like that. And so if I look at the screwdriver, then that looks like almost a horizontal line, almost straight 9 to 3 o'clock. Instead, it's slightly going up towards the right side. So it's like 8:55. No, no, yes, just not exactly horizontal, but slightly leaning to the left. And so, and in the paper underneath, you can see a very distinct angle there. That to me feels like that. Yes, oops, too much. So it feels more like that. So this feels more like 8 o'clock, maybe 8:10. And so that is part one of the axis and the angles exercise. I want to see the dials and I want to see the lengths in them. So for part two, I'm gonna have you do one of the human figure, and I recommend that you find a volunteer, you get a partner, your classmate, no, okay, no. You could ask someone at home. You can ask someone at home to sit down. They don't have to do what this lady's doing. You don't have to be in the nude. You can wear clothes and still find the angles quite easily. Something that I've noticed when I read the student questionnaires, that a lot of you wanted to get better at drawing faces and drawing the human body. Sadly, we don't do too much of that in this class, basically because there's a class dedicated to drawing the figure. It's a fun class. And right now they don't teach it at Madera. They teach it at FCC and I believe at Clovis, at least within our district. So it's one of the funnest classes I've ever taken. I think I took 2 semesters of that. Yes, you get a live model and they do poses that, you know, we can spend like 3 hours just to draw that one, and it's fun. So it's such a fun class. And so for the figure, for part two, again, ask a roommate, ask your, you know, your siblings or whoever's close by, and get some of these major landmark diagonals. And so for me, right away, I'm looking at the very strong diagonal from her spine or her back. So that feels like, you know, almost a 6 o'clock, not exactly. It feels like not 12 to 6, but slightly leaning to the left, just a little bit. And that strong diagonal being made by her upper arm, her connect, her elbow to her shoulder. And that's a very nice, this is a really skilled drawing. There's a little bit of foreshortening in there. In other words, you can see the rest of her arm in the distance there. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later, foreshortening. And so the chair, there is a very strong diagonal there. So it's not straight up and down. Okay. And then there's the upper thigh, the upper leg there. There's making that diagonal. And so because I'm using my pencil, I'm actively, I'm interacting with what I am looking at. And so before I even draw, I'm already connected to some of these lines. The body feels like this shape here. The leg feels like this shape here. If you look at her lower leg, it's that's a pretty good diagonal. Okay, not straight up and down, very slanted. Okay, and so you know, don't worry about drawing the figure the way the artist did. You don't have to put that much detail in it right now. Lightly sketch it out. Just get the major shapes, and then find these diagonals. Remember that these exercises are here for you to develop something outside of what a lot of you are already doing, remember that this drawing class was made for beginners. This is a beginning drawing class. I treat the whole class like they are still beginners. And if you are already, experienced, that's really cool. Don't let me slow you down. You can still draw and stuff, but I think, get these techniques down. Hopefully they can help you out. So let me know if you guys have any questions.